Hi there, my name's Tony Grosh, reporting for the Angling Times. Now, as you'll know, the country at the moment is commercial fishery mad. There's a lot of big fisheries out there that you'll all have heard of. There's fisheries like Makins, there's fisheries like Decoy, there's Lindholm, and you've heard of all of them. But mixed amongst them, some fantastic little fisheries that don't get the publicity that they deserve. And I've come today to one of those fisheries. Now, this is Yoke Hill, which is based near Corby, which is near Kettering. And it's a fantastic little fishery. Now, over the years, it's been written off by some people, but that's really been unfair. Because it's a cracking little water, it's full of carp, it's full of silvers, there's two waters, and we've come down to meet one man, Steve Oswick, who's really the man of the moment down here. So Steve, tell me, how did you find out about this little cracker?
Well, it started off many years ago when I used to fish for one of my old clubs, and we used to fish here quite a lot really, both on this lake and on the Figure of Eight lake, and we used to get quite good bags of fish, or most weeks that we were here, but unfortunately for a little while it went very quiet. A lot of clubs started drifting away, going to some of the more popular venues, and over time it just went very quiet. So a few weeks ago I heard about it, a rumour that it was fishing a little bit better, and I decided to come over here on one of my old club matches again. They booked the venue for another time, and it just started from there really. I came over, had a good day's fishing, and never looked back really.
Brilliant. And what's sort of the lowest weight you've done here? The lowest?
The lowest weight I've done is 105 pound off this lake.
Now, that's prolific fishing, as you can appreciate, but it's not the sort of fishing where you can just lump in and catch fish. You don't have to use complicated tactics, but you have to think about what you're doing. So, I guess on this snake line, which is called, what's the name of this?
This is Wilfred's Weir.
And this, I'm guessing, pole dominates on it?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, you could get a feeder over there, but because the slope on the far bank, it's very, very steep, so keeping a feeder nice and tight up to the far bank is quite difficult. So yeah, it's generally a pole water.
If you've got a pole, that's the number one tactic, because the bank's like that, so it comes down like that. If you land the feeder on it, it's going to roll down, it's going to be out your target zone very quickly. So if you've got a pole, try and use it. If not, a small waggle will work up in the water, pinging pellets, but pole is the number one tactic. So we've been watching for a few hours, and there's two rigs that appear to dominate. So we'll just take this one off. This is your deck rig.
Yep.
Doesn't look anything too complicated, Steve.
No, I always try and keep my my rigs and my kit as simple as possible really. There's nothing fancy about it. It's pretty much just a deck rig that I try and fish right up as close as I can to the far bank without being in too much shallow water, because of the slope on the far bank being quite so steep.
So that there, which is approximately, I'd say, around 18 inches to 2 foot?
Yeah, around about 2 foot, yeah.
And how far after you fish that from the far bank?
Usually try and get within 2 to 3 feet of the far bank, or and if there's any overhanging features coming out from the far bank, you can normally catch under the reeds and under the grasses.
So there's a lot of variation. That we've got grasses, but then we've got mud bank as well. So try fishing between the two, because the fish will feed in both. At times they've backed off, haven't they,
oh,
Steve?
Yeah,
and you know, you can catch in the
Definitely.
Grasses and then vice versa. So talk me through the rig. What have we got on in terms of like the elastic at the top?
Well, for the elastic on this particular top kit, I've got the Preston Green 13 hollow.
Yeah.
Set quite slack because some of the fish are quite small. But the majority of the fish are quite hard fighting. So on the strike, you want a fairly slack, fairly soft, forgiving elastic. And the main rig is literally just a 6 pound midi low vis, straight through to a size 14 Fox Series 2 carp hook, barbless, tied on hook in the loop style.
Is there any reason you go for the loop?
It's just one of those things that I picked it up a few years ago off someone, and I've never looked back really. I've just sort of kept on with it. It's never let me down. I just find it a little bit more reliable than any of the other knots that I've used in the past. So.
Fantastic. And I'm guessing that would offer less resistance when the fish picks it up because it's free running.
Yeah, I think the hook in the loop was originally designed as a way of catching skimmers on the deck, for shy biting skimmers and stuff. So with it being in the loop, the hook is a lot freer to move around. But I've been using it for a few years, and it's done me proud.
Excellent. Just looking at the flow, we've got a very light, it's only a 4x8. Is there any reason we go with a light pattern here, Steve?
Well, my main reason is that because you're fishing up against a slope and it's quite sharp, you don't always find that the fish will be fishing exactly the same line all the time. So what I try and do is find something that's quite light, it doesn't take a lot of shot, and I use basically a piece of corn. Average size piece of corn will just about take that under the surface. So if you're fishing too deep, as you've got it set, it will just nip under the surface, and all you have to do is just shift a little bit further forward and just edge it up the bank and edge it up the bank until you find a way that the float's sitting that you're comfortable with.
So the idea of that is you overshot your float ever so slightly, and then you push it over. If the float's not showing, the bait's not touching bottom. Nudge it up the shelf, and if your float just shows, and it's just touching bottom. If you push it further up the shelf, too much float shows, you're probably too much over depth. It's a matter of working up and down that shelf, and you'll find exactly where you should be fishing. And it's a great way of fishing, and it shows some sensitive bites, I'm guessing.
It certainly does, yeah. I mean, you saw yourself at points, very sharp bites, and also some of the slower bites, you can see them just slowly drifting away under the surface, and other times it will just disappear and the elastic will start flying out.
And as Steve said, you get these little slow bites, and you think they're good, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, 3 foot of elastics out, and you've got a 4 or 5 pound carp. That's absolutely brilliant. And just looking at your feeding contraption, just a small pot. Do you start off with a dump pot at all? Or?
No, as a rule, when I'm over here, what I'll do is I'll fill that almost to the top as a start with just dampened 4mm pellets, and then just ship straight out with that. I try not to feed too much at the start. Just try and gauge, see if the fish are already there first, and then throughout the day you just gauge it yourself. You just, if they back off a little bit, feed a little bit more. If they're biting well, either not feed or just feed sort of half a pot every time.
And it's just a small tin of corn and maybe a packet of bag and pellets all day.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's all you need.
It's cheap fishing, excellent. And then if those fish decide at times that even though you're fishing in shallow water, even if you're in 12 inches, they will come up to 6 inches and you'll get funny bites. Well, I've got a second rig for that then, Steve.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I also set up a shallow rig as well. Again, fished almost at the same distance, which is roughly around about 16 metres, and I'll just set it around about 6 to 8 inches shorter than the deck rig. Keep all the shot just under the float, so it doesn't matter where you put it. Even if you're fishing up against a slope, your float will still cop perfectly. So even if you are just it's one of those rigs that really you can either fish it shallow or you can use it as a plodding round rig and just sort of trying to find where the fish is sitting.
Excellent. And there's another bonus of putting the shot under the float. As Steve said, put the float under there, it'll cock straight away, and when you're fishing shallow you can get the bites in the top couple of inches, can't you? So instantly it shows. The other bonus is if they're feeding at 12 inches deep, that'll be a really slow fall, so you can catch fish all the way through the layers. If you put that shot down to the bottom of the rig, it'll bomb through. You could be missing out on vital fish, really. And I guess it's a matter of catching throughout that whole depth, isn't it? As it drops.
Yeah. It's one of those things. They could be cruising around because of the sharp slope over the far bank there. It's just one of those rigs that it's fishing at all depths.
Fantastic. Well, it's a very basic fishing, but let's have a see how you do it. Let's have a watch you for 5 minutes, mate.
Okay. All right.
So, there's your rig. Let's have a go.
There you go, typical Yoke carp.